Yesterday we talked about solenoid, and I think you remember that we had a solenoid, and I told you solenoid is simply an arrangement of a copper wire wound in helical shape, right? And that was called a solenoid, and we had a magnetic field in the core of the solenoid, and the magnetic field was mu naught n into I. That was the formula for the magnetic field. I told you it is mu naught n into I, where mu naught is the permeability of the medium which is inside the core of the solenoid. For example, if you have a solenoid and there is air inside the turns, I mean, there is no other material other than air. So the permeability that will be used is mu naught. But if there is some other medium inside this core of the solenoid, let's say, if I place a iron bar inside the solenoid, try to understand what I'm saying. If I place iron bar, it's an iron bar which is placed inside the core of the solenoid, iron bar. Then in that case, and let's say let relative permeability of iron bar is mu r. You will understand this relative permeability or permeability in the very next chapter, which is matter and magnetism. But here you just have to remember relative permeability is same as like relative permittivity. If you remember in the electrostats chapter, you studied about relative permittivity, which was equal to the permittivity of a medium with respect to the permittivity of air, right? That was called as relative permittivity. In the same way, relative permeability means permeability of a medium upon permeability of air. And what is this permeability? Permeability is simply the property of the medium which determines the strength of magnetic field in that medium. Means more is the permeability, more will be the strength of the magnetic field in that medium, and less is the permeability, less will be the magnetic field. So mu r is equal to mu upon mu naught, where mu is the permeability of iron. Here mu is the permeability of iron, mu naught is permeability of air, and relative permeability is basically nothing but mu iron upon mu naught, right? So if you place an iron bar, what you will write? You will write permeability of iron as equal to relative permeability multiplied by mu naught. This is what you will write, right? You will write it as product of permeability of iron. Permeability of iron would be written as the product of relative permeability and mu naught. In that case, the formula of magnetic field of the solenoid will take this form: mu r mu naught into n into I. Did you understand what did I say till now? If you have some other medium inside the core of the solenoid, then what you will do, you will write, instead of writing only mu naught, you will write it as a product of relative permeability and mu naught. Is it clear? And if in the place of relative permeability, the permeability of the medium is already given. For example, let's say if in question permeability of medium is given, let's say permeability of iron is given, so you will not write this, you will simply write it as B is equal to permeability of iron multiplied by N into I. Did you understand or not? Please respond. If you have air, you will write it as mu naught. If you have some other material, you will write the permeability of that material. Okay? If it is given directly, okay, Juvena. If it is given directly, so you will write it as permeability of that medium. If the permeability of a medium is not given, and what is given is relative permeability, so in that case, you will write the permeability of the medium as the product of relative permeability and permeability of air. Okay, so this is all. These all concepts were related to solenoid. We move to one another form of the solenoid, which is called as toroidal solenoid, and this is the last topic of this Ampere Circuitor's law, or related to Ampere Circuitor's law. After this, we're gonna start the force on the charged particle. Okay, so we will discuss magnetic force on a charged particle today. But before that, we have one more topic that should be talked about, and that is toroidal solenoid. Write the name of the topic. It is toroidal solenoid. We talked about solenoid yesterday, and we have another type of solenoid which is called as toroidal solenoid. See, the only difference between solenoid and the toroidal solenoid is of its arrangement. The only difference is of arrangement. There is no difference in the formula of magnetic field. There is no difference in the behavior of the solenoid in this case also. The only difference is of arrangement. And what is that difference? Try to understand. When a solenoid, if you take a solenoid and if you bent the solenoid in the form of a closed ring, means if a solenoid bent in the form of closed ring, in the form of closed ring, I'll let you know what is meant by closed ring. In the form of closed ring, then that solenoid will be considered as toroidal solenoid. Did you understand? Closed ring is called as toroidal solenoid or simply toroid. If you take a solenoid and you just bend that solenoid in the form of a ring, it will be considered as a toroidal solenoid. What does it mean? For example, let's say I have a ring. Let's say I have a ring, and I'm going to wound the copper wire on this ring in the form of closed rings, right? How? Let's see. These are the turns of the solenoid that I am winding over this ring, right? So I'm winding this solenoid over this ring. So obviously, the shape of the solenoid would also be like a closed ring. The shape of the solenoid will also be closed ring, and this closed ring shaped solenoids are basically called as toroid. Means if you wound a solenoid on a ring such that you get a closed ring shaped solenoid, then in that case it would be simply called as toroid, right? I hope you understood this. Let's say a current enters in this, and let's say current comes out from here, then you will again get the magnetic field in the core of the solenoid the way you got the magnetic field in a long solenoid. In the same way you will get the magnetic field in the core of the solenoid for the toroid also. Means what? Toroid is not a different thing. Toroid is also a solenoid. Then why are you calling it as toroid? Just because of its arrangement. It is same as you have studied two laws of vector addition. If you remember, there were two laws. One was called as triangle law and another one was called as parallelogram law. And if you remember, the only difference between the two laws was of its arrangement. If you arrange two vectors this way, that means if you take head of one vector and you coincide it with tail of another vector, the law that you apply in this case was called as triangle law. And if you take two vectors and their tails coincide at one point, then the law which is applied here to get the resultant was called as parallelogram law. But if you remember, the result of both of these laws were same, and that was equal to what? So that was equal to simply a square plus b square plus 2ab cos theta. This was the result in both the cases, right? Then why we had the two laws? We had two laws just because of the arrangement, right? That means we can arrange either the vector this way or that way. Similarly, you can have a solenoid. You can have a solenoid just like a cylinder, or you can have a solenoid wound over a closed ring to form a closed ring, especially, and that is called a toroidal solenoid. Now we're gonna talk about the formula of the magnetic field of this toroidal solenoid. Already I have told you, okay, this will also have the same magnetic field as the magnetic field of the solenoid or the previous solenoid, but we need to drive it, right? So to drive this result, we will be taking three loops. Try to understand. We will be taking three loops here. And what are these three loops and where we will take these loops? So try to understand. I'll take the first loop inside this ring. I'll take another loop inside the core of the solenoid. These are the Amperian loop that I'm taking to find out the magnetic field, right? And the third loop that I will be taking will be completely outside this solenoid this way. So we are having three loops this way. We are having three loops. There are three loops. This is the first loop, this is the second loop, and this is the third loop. So we are having three loops. And now I will be applying Ampere's Circuitor's law over all these loops individually, and then we will find the value of magnetic field. Let the radius of this inner loop is R1. Let the radius of this middle loop is R2, and let the radius of the outside loop is R3. If you apply If you apply Ampere Circuitor's law for all these three loops, try to understand. If you remember last day, which is yesterday, I told you in the case of the solenoid, the magnetic field exists only in the core of the solenoid, right? I told you the magnetic field exists only in the core of the solenoid. Outside the core, magnetic field will always be taken to be zero. So can anybody tell me what will be the magnetic field over the loop of radius R1? Means on loop 1, if I take the line integral of magnetic field over loop 1, what will be this result equal to? Don't you think it will be 0? And why will it be 0? Since the magnetic field here is 0. Similarly, I will be writing this for loop 3 first. If I take the line integral over the loop 3, what I would get? I'll again get 0. Why? Since this loop is outside the core of the solenoid, and there also the magnetic field is 0, hence it will also be 0. So the only loop that is remaining is loop number 2. Now I'll be talking about this loop. Try to understand. If I take line integral of B dot dl over the loop 2, so it should be equal to mu naught I according to the Ampere Circuitor's law. Now, what will be the value of this B dot dl? Can I write beta? And remember, this I is net current. Always remember that. We can take B as constant because at every point of loop 2, magnetic field value will be same as every point of loop 2 is equidistant from the center. Hence, magnetic field can be taken as constant. So it will be taken out of the integration dl is equal to mu naught multiplied by net current. Moving on, let us integrate this. What will you get if you integrate dl for the second loop? Don't you think it will become simply equal to? Don't you think it will become simply equal to b multiplied by 2 pi r multiplied by 2? 2 pi r2. I think the radius of the second loop I have taken it as r2. So hence the line integral of the magnetic field over this second loop will be exactly equal to the circumference of this loop, and the circumference of this loop will be equal to 2 pi multiplied by r, and the radius of this is r2. That is why I'm writing it as r2. This must be equal to mu naught multiplied by net current. Can any one of you please tell me what will be the value of net current here? And don't tell me, sir, that net current would be I. This I is the current which is flowing in a single turn. And how many turns do we have in this whole loop? So we can write this as, listen to me carefully. How many turns would be there? So if I assume, I'm writing it here. Let a small n is number of turns per unit length. Number of turns per unit length. If I take number of turns per unit length to be a small n, so what would be the total number of turns in this length of 2 pi r2? So it would be equal to n multiplied by 2 pi r2. And in each turn, you have a current equal to I. So what will be the total current? Just multiply it with I, right? 2 pi r2 and 2 pi r2 finally cancels out. Magnetic field that you will get will be simply equal to mu naught in I. And now we're going to start the second part of this chapter. Why I'm calling it a second part? Because till now, what we have discussed was the magnetic field. We calculated or derived the results for magnetic field due to a current carrying wire or due to a current carrying circular loop at the center of the circular loop or at the axial point of the circular loop. So we did, whatever we did was related to the magnetic field, how to calculate the magnetic field using Biot-Savart's law. Then the second law that we have studied to find the magnetic field was Ampere-Circuitor's law, which we have studied yesterday, right? So all these laws, whether it be Biot-Savart's law or whether it be Ampere-Circuitor's law, both of the laws were used to find the magnetic field. Now we are going to talk about the other aspects. Means what? Means we will check if we place a charged particle or a current carrying conductor in a magnetic field, so will it experience a force or not? And if it will experience the force, then what will be the behavior of that force? What will be the value of that force? That we are going to discuss now. Means the topic that we are going to start today is basically related to the force. That is why I am calling it as second part of this chapter. Because in the first part, you derive the results of magnetic field. In second part, you will derive the results of force and torque and all those, right? Okay, so write the name of the topic. Force on a charge in magnetic field. Write the name of the topic. Force on a charge in magnetic field. Force on a charge in magnetic field. Okay. Now let us understand. See how people came to know about the fact that there exists some magnetic force. For that, try to understand what I'm saying. Let's say this is a current carrying conductor and I placed a charge near this current carrying conductor and this charge is at rest, right? As this conductor is carrying current. So of course, there will be some magnetic field around this conductor. Obviously, the point where I have placed this charge, at that point, there will be some value of this magnetic field, right? So let us assume the magnetic field at this point is B and the charge is kept inside this magnetic field. If the charge is kept at rest, what we will observe is we will observe no deflection in the charge. If the charge is kept at rest, we will observe that charge will remain at the same position and it will remain at rest if it is initially at rest in this magnetic field. This means that charge will not deflect in either direction. And because charge is not deflecting, charge is not moving, so I can simply claim that there is no force acting on the charge, right? Means if you place a charge at rest inside a magnetic field, you will observe no force acting on the charge due to that magnetic field, right? And why are you saying this? Because if the charge is at rest, you will observe no deflection of the charge. And if there is no deflection means there is no force acting on this charge, right? Now, coming to the suddenly by accident, people gave it a velocity. Now the charge was given a velocity and let the velocity given to the charge is v. The moment charge was provided a velocity, people observed a deflection in the charge. Did you understand? Now the charge got deflected. And because the charge is deflected from its path, I can simply claim that the charge is experiencing some force, means there is some force acting on this charge because charge, there is a deflection in the path of this charge. And you know very well from class 11th and from Newton's laws of motion, if there is no force, charge, a body will not be deflected. It will continue to move on a straight line. If the path of a body is changing, it means there is some force which is changing its path, right? Which is also known as direction of inertia of direction, right? Means there is some force acting on this charge now. There was no force when the charge was at rest, but there is a force when the charge is in motion. Now, if I ask you which field is here now, of course, here is only one field, which is magnetic field. Because if it would have been the, if it would have been the, what I was saying, there is only magnetic field. If the charge would have been experiencing a force because of electric field, then it must have experienced this force when it was at rest, right? Why? Because if you place a charged particle in electric field, the charge experiences force irrespective of its state of motion. Either the charge is at rest or motion, doesn't matter. If a charge is inside the electric field, it will experience a force. Is it clear? But as I can see, as the charge is at rest, it is not experiencing any force, means here is no electric field. Because if there would have been an electric field, then in this case also the charge would have been experiencing a force. But as the charge is not experiencing force, I can simply claim that there is only one field, which is magnetic field. And we observed that the charge experiences this force because of the field only when it is given some velocity. This means that unlike electric field, in magnetic field, charge experiences force only when it is in motion. Did you understand? A moving charge experiences force in magnetic field, but a stationary charge doesn't experiences magnetic force, right? But in the case of electric field, charge experiences force either it is at rest or it is in motion. Means if I claim that there is some field, let's say, try to understand what I'm saying. If there is some field, I tell you in this region we have field. Let's say in this region we have some field, and I'll place a charge. Doesn't matter whether it is at rest or motion. If it experiences force, if there is force, force is not equal to 0. I will simply claim that this field is electric field. Did you understand what I'm saying? Because electric force due to electric field doesn't depend on the state of motion of the charge, right? This means that if a charge experiences force, I will simply say that the field is electric field. Means electric force is confirmatory test of electric field. Did you understand? Electrostatic force is the confirmatory test of electric field. Means whenever there is field, there will be force. Did you understand? Tell me yes or no. Electrostatic force is confirmatory test of electric field. In a region, if there exists some electric field, there will be electrostatic force. Okay, moving on. If I place a charge in a field, I'm saying that there is some field. I'm saying there is some field. But if charge doesn't experiences any force, let's say force is 0, it doesn't means there is no field. Did you understand what I'm saying? Please try to understand. If you don't get me, please ask. I'm saying, let's say I'm saying that there is magnetic field. Okay, be more specific. There is magnetic field in this region. Charge is at rest. What I observed is I observed no force acting on the charge. If you observe there is no force on the charge, you cannot claim that there is no magnetic field. Why? Because if in a magnetic field charge is at rest, it doesn't experiences force. Means force is not confirmatory test for the magnetic field. Magnetic force is not the confirmatory test for the magnetic field. What does it mean? A charge can experience zero force even if there exists a magnetic field. And when will it experience zero force? When there is no motion in the charge. Did you understand? So write a statement. Write a statement. Electrostatic field. Write a statement. Electrostatic force. Electrostatic force. Electrostatic force is confirmatory test of electric field, whereas magnetic force is not confirmatory test for magnetic field. I hope you got my point. I'm simply saying, if you just want to check whether there exists some electric field or not, so in that region you just place a charge. If it experiences force, you will simply claim that there is electric field. But if you want to know whether in a region there is magnetic field or not, if you just place the charge, it may or may not experience force depending on the state of motion. And I'll let you know, even if the charge is in motion, it may experience zero force even in the magnetic field. Right? That is why I'm saying magnetic force is not the confirmatory test of magnetic field, whereas electrostatic force is the confirmatory test of electric field. I hope you got my point, right? Now, let us talk about this force. What will be the value of this force? What would be the magnitude of this force? So this force was calculated or derived experimentally, right? And people came to the conclusion that the magnetic force was directly proportional to the magnitude of the charge. The force that is experienced by the charge, I'm talking about magnetic force, remember, that was directly proportional to the magnitude of the charge. This force was proportional to the magnetic field in that region. This force was proportional to the velocity of the charge. And this force was proportional to sine of theta, where theta is angle between, direction of velocity of charge and magnetic field. Let us assume if the magnetic field is in this region or in this direction and the velocity is in this direction such that the angle between them is theta, so it will also depend on this factor which is called as theta, right? So by combining all these factors, I can write F is proportional to mod of Q into V into B into sine theta. Mod means we don't have to put the sign of the charge, we only have to take the magnitude of the charge, because charge can be either positive or negative, but you just have to place the magnitude, right? This is same as of a scalar form of Coulomb's law. In a scalar form of Coulomb's law also, you used the magnitude only, right? In the same way here also you will only use the magnitude. Okay, now if I make an equation, if I remove this proportionality sign and if I put a equal to sign, I will have to use a constant which is called as proportionality constant, and let that proportionality constant is k. So I can write it as k q v b multiplied by sine theta. I have removed this mod because you have understood the meaning. That mod is just representing the fact that you have to use only the magnitude and not the sign of the charge, right? If charge is negative, then also you will just put its value. You don't have to put a negative sign. Okay, so F is equal to k q v b sine theta, where k is proportionality constant. Fortunately, in SI unit, the value of this k was measured and it came out to be 1. Means the value of k is 1, hence we can write the force acting on a charged particle as qvb sine theta. This is the formula for magnetic force on a charged particle. And by this formula, you can understand the fact that this force is not only depending on these parameters, It is also depending on the factor which is theta, and which is the angle between magnetic field and velocity. What does it mean? Sir, it means if you have charge and which is given a velocity v, and if this velocity is in the direction of magnetic field such that theta is 0, or if the charge is given velocity opposite to the direction of magnetic field such that theta is equal to 180°, then in both of these two cases, force will still be 0. Although the charge has motion, still the force will become 0, right? Because this force is also depending on the angle between the magnetic field and velocity. And this force will be maximum when sine theta will be maximum, and sine theta will be maximum when theta will be 90°. That means if magnetic field and velocity are perpendicular to each other, this force will be maximum, and the maximum value of this force will be qvb, right? So even if the charge is in a state of motion, the force on the charged particle can be 0 inside the magnetic field. That is why again and again I am repeating the same, that magnetic force is not the confirmatory test for the magnetic field, but electrostatic force is the confirmatory test for the electric field. Now, second point which I need to talk on, see, force is a vector quantity, right? And what we have just written is the magnitude of this force, qvb sine theta. This is the magnitude of this force, right? I want to write it in vector form. So what will be the vector form of this force? So just try to understand. See, beta, here this q is a scalar quantity. Q is a scalar quantity, obviously. V is vector quantity. Magnetic field is vector quantity. V is vector quantity. Magnetic field is vector quantity. And theta is the angle between them. If you can recollect from class 11, you have already studied A cross B. If I take the cross product of two vector, it will be equal to AB sine theta. Do you remember that? So I can write this quantity also as, try to understand. If you don't understand, please ask. Try to understand this. Q is a scalar quantity, so I am not concerned with this Q. VB sine theta. Here V is also a vector, B is also a vector. And the product of VB is VB sine theta. Means, can I write it as V cross B beta? According to this formula, can I write this as V cross B? This is the vector form, means the cross product of velocity and magnetic field when multiplied with the charge, you will get the force. Now try to understand, because force is a vector quantity, it will have some direction. What would be its direction? Try to understand what I'm saying. Beta, cross product of two vector always has direction or not? Tell me yes or no. If you take the cross product of two vector, will it have some direction? Of course it will have, right? If you remember, the cross product direction was given by I cross j is equal to k. If you can recollect, please tell me yes or no. Cross product has direction or not? Because cross product of two vector is also called as vector product. Okay, so cross product has direction. Means the direction of force, I can, by this equation, I can finally say that the direction of this force, direction of F will be in the direction of of cross product of V and B. The direction of this force will be in the direction of cross product of V and B, right? Whatever will be the cross product of V and B, that will be the direction of force also. Let me tell you one more point, then I'll give you the easiest way to find the direction, but try to understand the physics of it. First of all, force will be in the same direction in which the cross product will lie. And whose cross product I'm talking about? I'm talking about the cross product of velocity and magnetic field. The direction in which the velocity, the cross product of velocity and magnetic field will lie, will be the direction of force also. For example, if V cross B, the direction of V cross B is along x-axis, the direction of force will also be along x-axis. If the direction of velocity and B, the cross product, will be along y-axis, the direction of force will also be along y-axis. First point. Second point, if you can remember, the direction of cross product of two vectors is always perpendicular to the plane containing the two vectors. You didn't get me, right? Try to understand what I'm saying. The direction of cross product of two vectors is always perpendicular to the plane containing two vectors. What does it mean? It means if you have a vector along x-axis, if you have a vector along y-axis, and you take I cross j, the direction of these two vectors would be along the third axis, which is k, that is z-axis. Did you understand? Means this direction would be perpendicular to both x as well as y. Is it clear? On the other hand, if we have two vectors, let's say one is along x-axis, another one is along z-axis. In that case, the direction of the cross product would be along y-axis. Is it clear? Tell me yes or no. Okay, sir. Means the direction. Okay, then what does it mean? It means direction of magnetic force. Direction of magnetic force will always be perpendicular to the plane containing the plane containing v vector and b vector. Okay, this is the simple meaning of this. Means the direction of force is going to be always perpendicular to the plane which contains velocity vector as well as magnetic field vector. Just note these points, then I'll tell you the simplest way to find this direction. One way to find the direction is by cross product. The another simplest way for this is a rule which is called as Fleming left hand rule, which you be aware of, I guess. You must be aware of that rule also, because you must have studied this rule in class 10th also. Now, the easiest way to find the direction of magnetic force, try to understand. So this rule is called Fleming left hand rule. The rule that I'm going to talk about is Fleming left hand rule. What does it give? It gives the direction of magnetic force. Fleming left hand rule. Try to understand. It simply says if you stretch your first three fingers of your left hand, that means first three fingers means what? Thumb, the first finger, and the middle finger. Try to understand. Let me show you by switching on my video. Just hold on. Please wait for a minute. Let me switch on my video to make you understand properly. Okay, can you see me now? See, this is my left hand, and these are three fingers of my left hand which are stretched. Thumb, the first finger, and the middle finger. Can you see me? What does this rule say? Try to understand. This rule simply says that if you place your first finger in the direction of magnetic field and middle finger in the direction of current, then the thumb will give you the direction of force. I will repeat this again. If you place this first finger in the direction of magnetic field, middle finger, this finger, in the direction of current, remember I'm saying this should be placed in the direction of current. I didn't tell you this should be placed in the direction of velocity. I am saying this should be placed in the direction of current. Then this thumb will give you the direction of force. Is it clear to all? This is known as Fleming left hand rule, right? This is known as Fleming left hand rule. Now, by applying this rule, tell me what would be the direction of this charge particle. I'm talking about this charge, which is positive. It is going in this direction. Okay, good. It is going towards right. The magnetic field is directed along positive y-axis. Magnetic field is in the direction of positive y-axis. This is the direction of magnetic field. Can you tell me the direction of force by applying this Fleming left hand rule? The first finger you have to keep in the direction of field. The middle finger you have to keep in the direction of current. And thumb will give you the direction of force. Can you tell me what would be the direction of force on this charge? Can you please tell me? Outward. Very good, Jubena. Okay. It would be outward. Right, Johanna? Outwards. Of course, it would be outwards, Johanna. If I, on the other hand, if I take the charge to be negative and I give you the velocity this way towards right, but remember charge is negative and magnetic field is upwards. Now what will be the direction of force? Will it be same or different? See, why will it not be same? I told you the inverse, right, Afroza? I told you what? I told you the direction, I told you the middle finger must be kept in the direction of current. But here is no current, sir. How will put my middle finger in the direction of current? So you remember from the chapter current electricity, the direction of current is always in the direction of motion of positive charge, and the direction of current is always in the opposite direction of motion of negative charge. Means if you have a positive charge, the direction of current will also be in the direction of velocity. But on the contrary, if you have negative charge, then the direction of current will be opposite to the motion of the charge. Did you understand? And middle finger must always be kept in the direction of current, not in the direction of velocity. So first you will check the direction of current. If it is positive charge, direction of current will be in the direction of velocity. And if it is negative charge, the direction of current will be opposite to the direction of velocity. So middle finger this time would be kept towards negative x-axis. Magnetic field is towards positive y-axis. Then your thumb will be pointing inwards. Just confirm it. Thumb will now be pointing inwards. Means here the direction of force is inwards. Force is inwards. Direction of force is inwards, and in this case the direction of force is outwards. Okay, force is outward. Did you understand the Fleming left hand rule? Please tell me one more time, yes or no. Middle finger must always be kept in the direction of current and not in the direction of velocity. Okay, moving on. So okay, good. So moving on, we have already talked about the magnetic force acting on a charged particle, right? Now we need to talk about one more force, which is also called as a Lorentz force. You need to understand it is not a some complicated thing. It is simplest thing that to understand. And the force is Lorentz force, right? Lorentz force. And what this force is all about. So try to understand. I just talked about the force which the charged particle experiences in a magnetic field, right? And you already know the force that is experienced by the charged particle in electric field. Means if you will keep the charged particle in electric field, it will experience electrostatic force. And if you will keep the charged particle in magnetic field, it will experience magnetic force, right? Neglect the other condition, but if there is magnetic field, there is a chance of magnetic force, right? So if both the fields act simultaneously, if in case both electric field and as well as magnetic field both acts simultaneously, if both the fields acts simultaneously, then what will happen? Charge will experience the two forces at the same time. One will be because of the electrostatic field and the another one will be because of the magnetic field. So there would be the two forces acting on the charged particle at the same time, right? Means if we have two fields in the presence of, I can simply say that in the presence of electric field and magnetic field, if we have both the fields there combined, right? In the presence of electric field and magnetic field, the net force on the charged particle would be the vector sum of two forces. One is electrostatic force and the another one is magnetic force. Is it clear? Now, what we can write this electrostatic force as? Electrostatic force you have already studied in class, sorry, not in class, in last chapters, that is the first chapter of your syllabus. You have already studied about the electrostatic force, which is Q into E. And the magnetic force, we have talked about it today itself. And we wrote it V cross B multiplied by Q in vector form. So by this, can we write this as F is equal to Q E plus of V cross B? This formula or this equation is the gives you the net force acting on the charged particle, and this force is called as Lorentz force. Means Lorentz force is nothing but the combination of two forces. One is electrostatic force and the another one is magnetic force. When both the fields act simultaneously on a charge, then the force will also be the sum of the two forces. So we have talked about the force. We have talked about the force on a charged particle, which is simply Q into VB into sine theta, or you can say it is Q V cross B. Okay, good. And we have already talked about the Lorentz force. Now we are in position to solve few numerical problems based on this force formula, which is acting on the charge. And then we will be talking about next concepts, right? So I have a question for you now. And the question is this way. I have a charged particle whose magnitude question. I have a charged particle whose magnitude is 1.5 microcoulomb. This is the magnitude of the charge, microcoulomb, right? The speed of the charged particle is given as 2 into 10 to the power 6 meter per second. This is the speed. And this speed is along x-axis. It is mentioned in the question. This speed is 2 into 10 to the power 6 meter per second along x-axis. The velocity of charged particle is along x-axis. And in this region, magnetic field is given as 0.2 j cap plus of 0.4 k cap, right? This is the magnetic field, right? Given in vector form, and the unit is Tesla. You just have to find the magnetic force. What will be the magnetic force on this charged particle? This is your question. What would be the force? Can you please tell me what will be the value of force? How will you solve it? Sir, what we are supposed to do? We will use this concept which says V cross B, right? Because here the theta is not given. You don't know the value of theta between the velocity and magnetic field. So you cannot use the magnitude wala formula. You cannot use this formula because theta is unknown to you, right? So what you will do, you will take the cross product of velocity vector and magnetic field vector. Means what will you write? You will write this force as 1.5 microcoulomb. Let us convert it into coulomb. So it would be 1.5 into 10 to the power minus 6 coulomb. I think you understood this, right? Now what you are supposed to do, you have to take the cross product. Whose cross product you gonna take? You're gonna take the cross product of V and B. Is it correct? What will you write? The velocity vector 2 into 10 to the power 6 is its magnitude, and the direction would be along x-axis. So what will you write the unit vector here? I cap, because the unit vector pointing in the direction of x-axis plus x-axis is I cap, right? Now you will take the cross product of this with 0.2 j cap plus of 0.4 k cap. This the dot product you have to take. Now how will you take the dot product? So let me solve this for you. 1.5 into 10 to the power minus 6. I have no issue with this. This will be as it is. I will first be talking about this. You will take the cross product of I and j first, right? So what will you write? You will write it as 0.4 into 10 to the power 6 because magnitude will be multiplied simply. And the cross product of I cross j has to be taken. I cross j, you will write it as I cross j plus this will be written as 0.8 into 10 to the power 6. This will be I cross k. I hope you are getting everything. Have you understand every bit of this? What will be the value of I cross j? Who will tell me? Very good. I cross j is k. And what is I cross k? What is I cross k? Not j, minus j. I cross k, remember, I cross k is always equal to minus j. Right? You can remember this circle if you want. This is how we talk about this circle. I, let's say it is I, let it is j, let it is k. Right? So if you, sorry, I made a mistake. Take a circle this way. Here is your I, here is your j, here is your k. If you go clockwise on this circle, take the cross product positive. You take it as positive. And if you go anti-clockwise on this circle, take the cross product to be negative. I hope you got my point. If you go clockwise on this circle, take these cross product as positive. And if you go anti-clockwise, take the cross product to be negative. For instance, I cross j or j cross k or k cross I, the product would be positive. If you go anti-clockwise, that is I cross k or k cross j or j cross I, you will take it as negative. Did you understand, everyone? Okay. So what we have done is just the cross product of these two, and rest you can solve, right?